Curious Monster. This story takes place about 12 or 13 years ago when I was a kid. I come from a less than desirable area, in a small mountain community where most people, my family included, just managed to scrape by. This meant that for me and my siblings, we lived in a small house that could barely fit us, with poor insulation, and it was in desperate need of repairs. But we made it work, and we appreciated what our parents could do, because we were still better off than a lot of the other families that we knew. The winters are harsh here in the mountains, and because of the poor insulation, me and my siblings would sleep in the living room as close to the fire as possible, and we would huddle under our one huge blanket. There's one night that sticks with me to this day, because for the life of me, I still cannot fathom what it was that I saw. It was late at night, and I've always been a very poor sleeper, so I would wake up through most of the night already. Not to mention, we were struggling to keep warm. And so I woke up very suddenly, and felt like there was someone or something in the room with us. I initially shrugged this off because we had a few busted windows and holes in the floor, which would allow the occasional opossum or stray cat to wander in. And during winter, this was actually a fairly common occurrence. With the light of the TV that was still playing, I looked around, and to my left, I saw this thing. It had the body of a turtle, but was rather edgy and spiked. Not to a point, though. It was more like a Mayan temple. And the face was most comparable to, I guess, a sort of lion/dragon mix. Almost like an alligator or a snapping turtle, in that it was large and frightening, but it had a brachycephalic nose. It had a mouth with teeth and not a beak. It was looking at my little brother and I, moving his head slowly back and forth between us. Out of fear that I would cause it to bite one of us if it noticed I was awake, I just laid there with my eyes barely open, just in case it was aggressive, so I could wake up my brother before he could hurt us. All he did, though, was glance between us a few times, and very slowly walk to the stairway that led down to the bathroom, and somehow went down the steps without making a sound. This was confusing to me, since my dad's friend has a large Sulcata tortoise, and I knew that an animal with a shell that large, this would have been close to the size of a juvenile sulcata, about 45 to 60 pounds. And these things don't move gracefully, and it should have been clunking down each step, or at least the first drop. I chalked it up to a bad dream, and then later thought it might be night terrors, or some sort of sleep paralysis, but it still didn't quite fit. Years later, my brother and I were hanging out with friends, and they were talking about ghosts, when my brother starts telling the same story, with the same description, and how he had just shut his eyes and prayed that it would leave. This is why I thought he was still asleep, and I had never told him or anyone else this story. What did we see? The Doppelganger and the Intruder. Long story short, me and my wife moved into a new house. I normally get up at about 4:10 a.m. and get ready for work. My alarm went off at 4 a.m, so I sat up, told my wife that I was getting ready to leave, gave the side of her head a kiss, and then got up to go and get ready for work. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairwell. There was an intruder in the house. I yelled at my wife to get up, but there was no response. So I screamed at her and got ready to attack whoever was coming up the stairs. A moment later, my wife reached the top of the stairwell. It was her coming up the stairs. Startled, I looked back at the bed, and her spot was now empty. It turned out that my wife was downstairs using the toilet. I was wide awake the whole time, so I have no idea what could have happened. The nightstand lamp was on during the whole time of this incident, and when I first got up, I saw her hair, and I felt it when I kissed her. It wasn't until after she came up the stairs that I saw that the bed was empty. Haunting at the Old Flats. By the age of 14 or 15, I had developed a keen interest in the paranormal, and often used Ouija boards and went on ghost hunts and dabbled in seances and the like. I was a paper boy, and on my route, I would be on the lookout for abandoned houses, run-down houses, etc., anywhere that looked haunted. The block of flats up the road from my mum's house were being torn down after many years of use, so it was all boarded up with metal shutters, doors and windows and no way in or out. Me and my cousin, who was about 12 or 13 at the time, were doing my route when we stopped outside the flats and decided to do one of our seances to see if anything would happen. We climbed the battered steps to the boarded up entrance, held our hands and said, "If there's anybody there, make a noise." Nothing. "If there's anybody there, don't be afraid. Please show yourself." A few seconds later, we heard a bicycle or tricycle rolling in the corridor of the flats, and a child's laughter from the top of the building all the way down to the bottom. We turned to each other with eyes wide open, shocked. It stopped, so I then said again, "If there's anybody there, make a sound," and we let go of each other's hands. As soon as we let go, every single shutter on that building started banging and shaking violently, getting louder and louder. My cousin ran down the stairs, across the grass and across the road behind us. As for me, I was stuck. I was frozen on the spot. I couldn't move, be it out of fear or something else stopping me. I don't know. I was just stuck there, staring at the shutters as they were bending violently. I looked down below the crumbling steps, and below was broken glass and shrapnel and tons of bricks. My mind was telling me to jump to safety, safety away from this banging, safety which was 25 to 30 feet below me. Then it just all suddenly stopped. It didn't slow down like it might with wind causing the noise. It just stopped dead. There was no noise, no nothing. When this happened, I was finally free to move, and so I turned around to see my cousin walking back towards me, and I darted down those steps and onto the grass banking. Although we were both very shaken, we decided to hold hands again, and we said, "Show us how you died." Why we did that, I'll never know. Nothing happened after we said that, and so we let go of our hands and carried on with the paper route. We got to the next house on my route, and an old motorbike driving past beeped and waved at us. It intentionally slowed down to wave. We didn't know who it was at all, and there was no one else around us that they could be waving at. It then sped off, around the corner to the next street, and we heard this huge crash. A big crash. Then we heard a faint ambulance siren. We ran to the end of the road and around the corner to see nothing. It's a long road, and nowhere along it could we see any ambulance or bike. Nothing. Lady from the Mirror. I was 6 when this happened, and it's still clear as day in my mind. I was sleeping with my mum, dad, and sister. We had this long body mirror in front of the bed, and so I woke up in the middle of the night, and I stared at the mirror. And I can't stress enough just how real this was. But a lady came out of the damn mirror. Slowly. I'm getting goosebumps writing this. I couldn't see her face because it was covered with long hair, and she was wearing a white dress, very similar to the movie The Ring, but I hadn't seen that movie at that time. And she was glowing. The reason why I still remember it was because she was literally so bright. She didn't emit any light to her surroundings, but it was on her, like an aura maybe. She slowly walked from one end of the room and to the other, just going through the wall. I didn't scream, but I just hid in my blanket. I don't know why I didn't try to wake anyone up, but when morning came, I told my family and they believed me. The afterlife is a social event. Just some context here for you. My granddad, mum's dad, passed away May last year with lung cancer. It was all very sudden. And so I was home alone earlier today, still living with my family, and everybody was out. We had a phone call downstairs. I don't usually answer the phone when home alone, unless I recognize the number. I saw the number on the home phone, and I didn't recognize it at all. It wasn't even a number from my country. I let it run through to the answering machine, and I hear lots of people talking, almost like you'd hear in a cafeteria or a busy restaurant. The message wasn't long, maybe about 10 seconds, and towards the end, I hear a voice exactly like my granddad's, saying, "Oi!" down the phone. Regardless of who it was, they sounded happy. I was just wondering if anyone could confirm if my granddad was reaching out to me, or if anyone else has had a similar experience. A reply to the previous story. I definitely believe that your granddad was communicating with you. About 2 years after my partner's mother died, he was having a particularly bad day. Later that night, after things were resolved, he went to bed. He said he was in bed, wide awake, when he heard his mother's voice distinctly talk to him. She called him by his name and calmed him, telling him that everything would be all right and that she would see him soon. At first, he was embarrassed to tell anyone for fear of being scoffed at, but obviously he told me, as he knows that I believe in all of that. I'm telling you this because you said it sounded like your granddad was in a busy cafeteria, etc. Well, the funny thing is that my partner said that when he heard his mother, it sounded like she was, for all purposes, at a New Year's Eve party. He could clearly hear chatter, like people in a big hall having a great time. He said it sounded like everybody was happy.